All right, good day, everybody. I'm back for the second episode in the series, Exploring the Bible. So, today we're going to be focusing on a few things. The main question we're going to be answering today is how can God be a just God and allow for bad things to happen? And I think that if you read the Bible, which we have right here, you read through Genesis, a lot of good happens and a lot of things that people can interpret as wrong happens in the sense that God treats us wrongly. And what I mean by that is he creates us in his image. All these things are good. Everything was very good. We covered that on the last episode. And then it goes on to say that shortly after he does that, at least in the context of the Bible, in the same book of Genesis, that the world turns away from him so corrupt that he actually destroys everything. And he floods the world and wipes it out and restarts. So the first question a lot of people ask me is, I've read, the first book of the Bible, and right off the hop, it's just this angry God that doesn't like his people and kills them all and says, I want to restart. And they come to me with the question of how can a just God do that? How can a just God allow that evil thing to happen? Right? And they consider the flood an evil act and him just wiping out the world and not giving us a chance. So we're going to walk through this a little bit and try to figure out why the flood happened, who caused the flood to happen, or what caused the flood to happen, goes along with the why, how it affects us today, and how it shows us who God is and what his image is, right? So to start it off, got a few definitions we're going to cover here, and I also have notes written down here just to help guide us along. I'm going to try to keep this under 30 minutes. Got a timer started there so we can keep track of that. But the first definition is going to be consequence. So a lot of people put consequence with a negative connotation, and the way I've always thought about it is consequence is simply a result of an action, right? So consequence isn't a bad thing, okay? There's good consequences. If you make good decisions, good consequences come about from that, okay? If you make bad decisions, then bad consequences come about from that. So if you win first place in a race, the consequence of that is getting a trophy, and no one thinks that's a bad thing, right? If you cheat on your wife and she divorces you, well, cheating is the act and divorce is the consequence, and that's not a good thing, right? So there's multiple ways to look at consequence. The way we're looking at it today is not negative. It's simply the return to your action, so the result of your action. The second definition is going to be anger. So people associate, again, anger with a negative connotation. And when they say that God is an angry God, just like jealousy, when they say God is a jealous God, we're going to cover that piece in another episode. But angry doesn't mean bad. Anger doesn't mean negative. Angry simply means that God will show his displeasure and he will show us that he is not happy with us. And he does it in a just way. And what I mean by that is when we do good things, his face shines brightly upon us, right? He shows us more who he is, and he allows us to know him more. And when we do wrong things, we don't we distance ourselves from him. He doesn't distance himself from us. So the more wrong we do and the more we say, God, you're not part of my life, the further we get from him. And we take that sometimes as him turning his face from us. But no matter what, he always offers you salvation. He always forgives you as long as you're willing to ask for forgiveness, right? And you ask for his gift of salvation. So his anger isn't that to smite you. It's simply, you've now chosen to disobey him so many times, he's going to display his displeasure with you. And anger is the way he does that. And he describes it that way so you can understand that he's not happy with you. You've disobeyed him as a fatherly figure so many times. He's now going to have a consequence to your actions. And then judgment's the third definition. And it goes along with anger kind of in the same context where people think that judging someone's a bad thing, but it's not. Judging in a neutral context means you are taking the actions that they've made and assigning the appropriate response to those actions. So again, is direct with the consequences. If you have judgment for doing a good deed, well, the consequences are going to be good. If you have judgment for doing something evil, the consequences are going to be bad. Right? If you murder somebody, you are judged as doing a wrongful thing, and your consequences are going to align with that judgment. And if you do great by people and you devote yourself to helping people, you're going to get judged by them, but the judgment's going to be that you are doing a good job. And then the consequence of that is you will get good things out of it. So the three definitions that are important to cover off the first bit here, because they're going to lay a foundation for what we're going to talk about. So the first question, why did God choose one man and his family over the entire population of the world? And this is really important to understand because it says in the Bible that God found Noah to be the only blameless man. Okay? He found Noah to be the only holy man left. And I don't think that's because God decided Noah would do that. That's because Noah decided that he would believe in God. So God's always said, follow me, and I will be there for you. Follow me. But you have to follow him first. He can't be there infinitely for you if you don't want him to be there. And because he's a just God, he's not going to force your hand and make himself present to you all the time if you choose and say to him, I don't want you, right? He gives you that option. So what Genesis is saying is that everyone in the world except for Noah said, I don't want you. And Noah said, I'm going to follow you. So God used that and used him to then pursue this goal of cleansing the earth. So it's important to know that no matter what happens, God never chooses your fate for you. He will only ever give you the option of life. And he informs you that the opposite of that is death. So he says, hop on the ark and you will live. And everyone in the world said, no, that's crazy. It's not going to fly. We don't have faith in God. He's going to do that. He's not powerful enough to do that. They just doubted him. And through that, they died. But God didn't sentence them to death. He gave them an option to humble themselves and hop on the ark. And only Noah did that. So that's the first point. God doesn't choose for you to die. You choose that. Along your road to death, he will say, all you have to do is believe in me and follow me, and you can have life. And if you truly do believe in him and follow him, you will repent from your sins and you will have life. So he's giving you an option to live throughout every situation. So people see God as the Old Testament God being angry and vengeful and upset with us all the time. And I think that it comes across that way because we were so far from God that his actions of cleansing the world and bringing us back to a more stable place where there is less evil and less idolization and less sin in general, he has to make very big decisions to do that. So he has to say, I'm gonna cleanse the whole world. I'm gonna flood the whole world. If you believe in me, hop on the ark. If you don't, you're gonna die. And these are your options. And so it's just very frank that you had the option to live and you chose not to, so you're dead. And that's not an angry God saying, I hate you all and I'm going to kill you all. That's him saying, no matter how much you sinned against me, you can still save yourself by hopping on this ark. And I will save you. But they chose not to. So he said, okay, your consequence is now going to arrive and it's going to flood. So why did the flood happen? This is an important question. Why did the flood happen? What did God see that made him choose to destroy the very thing he created? So it's a very downhill spiral from Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve were made, and then they sinned. They ate from the tree that God said not to eat from. One simple task. God said, okay, you no longer have infinite life. You're going to die. You know about death through the knowledge of good and evil. You know about evil. You are now going to eventually die. And their first two kids, Cain and Abel, it's amazing how fast it goes. The first offspring of Adam and Eve, the perfect beings created by God who walked along with God, had the first murder happen where Cain murdered Abel out of jealousy, essentially. And to not get into that story big, they both brought sacrifices to God, and God saw that Abel's was more genuine, more from the heart, and did his fullest extent of good with the sacrifice. And then Cain's was more of just a didn't care for it much, did it because he had to, brought a sacrifice, but it wasn't his best. And God said, you are not doing your best. And he went to Abel and said, you are doing your best. And they both had consequences to their actions. Abel was praised. Cain was told, you're not doing enough. And then Cain got jealous of Abel and killed him. So that's a quick kind of what happened there. But from that, if it can go so downhill from these two perfect beings to murder and their kids, then imagine how much that spirals. And you just start having sin fulfill the hearts of men in the world until God's not even in the picture anymore. And they have so many idols and they worship so many of their own values and beliefs, and they put so much faith in their own abilities instead of God that they simply don't care for God anymore and they think they don't need him. And so God sees this and he sees that this is going really bad, really fast. And he says, hey, that Noah's the only one blameless in this generation. I need to use him if mankind's going to get saved. If they want a chance as a civilization in the future, they have to start changing. And because they're not going to change, God says, I'm gonna make some change for you. And like I say, through this event, he's never sentencing anybody to death. He's saying you can live if you do this. So he's showing the people that he is stronger than their idols. He is stronger than their belief system by saying, I created you and I can take you out. You know that saying that your mom told you, I brought you into this world, so I have the power to take you out of it? Well, that's what God's saying. He's saying that I can do all things. I am all powerful. You can't doubt me. And if you doubt me, you're going to learn the hard way that I am not to be questioned and I am not to be one that you test my abilities, right? Because he's just saying this is how it's going to happen and this is how it's going to be. He warned people of a flood. Noah had 100 years to build the ark, and people were questioning, saying, why are you doing that? And he informed them why he was doing it. He was destined by God and told by God to do it, and he had faith. He was just fulfilling his faith in his actions. That's all he was doing. And they had opportunities over and over to have conversations with Noah and ask him why and how and all these things. And Noah had answers for them, but they didn't believe him. They had no more faith that God was powerful. So they brought this upon themselves ultimately. And then the other side of that, of why the flood happened, is God gave us another chance. So he saw the world was so corrupt. He said, the only way to cleanse this is if I flood it. And the flood has symbolism along with literal effect. So he literally did flood the earth. And water came from the heavens and from under the earth. And there's some scientific evidence, of course, I'm not a scientist. I believe that the tectonic plates, them shifting, and that's going from Pangea, the original continent, to a bunch of separate continents, is the tectonic plates moving and the water coming from under the earth through these cracks and in such velocity that mountains are formed and these plates are hitting each other so hard that big landscape changes happen. And then from the heavens, we used to have a field around us to protect the Earth's atmosphere more of water, and we lost that. And because of that, we now no longer have the same protection. A few things you could look at as if you want to make guesses on what could have happened. There's so many different ways to go with that, but that's not the point of this. The point is that there was a flood, and the flood happened, and the literal meaning is that he took all that was wrong with the world and killed it, right? Except for one of each of his kind, including Noah, his people, his family. And the other symbolic nature of that is a cleansing effect that water has. So throughout the Bible in the Old Testament, is always saying cleansing with water. So if you want to go be in God's presence, you must wash your hands with water and cleanse yourself certain ways, and you have to bathe. And there's certain instructions over and over and over again about cleansing yourself. Or if you touch something, go cleanse yourself. There's spiritual cleansing and physical cleansing. And so the symbolic nature of the flood is he is actually cleansing the earth. So he's saying, I'm going to use water to wash away every evil thing that man has done and all of man in the process, because they are now inherently evil. So I'm going to wash all this away. And when the water recedes, there'll be nothing but new life starting. The old is gone, the new is here. So that's a symbolism of it. And that's a powerful, powerful symbol, because it goes on throughout the Bible, like I say, through all of the Old Testament, including Jesus, and then in baptism. What is baptism? You're going under the water as your old self and symbolically coming out of the water as your new self. And there's a symbolic death. You are dying to your old self and you are now living with God. and you are now pursuing your life with his divine pursuit in mind, if that makes sense. So that's the symbolic and literal nature of the flood. Like I said, those are extremely important that you give credit to both of those things. So going forward here, what does it mean for us today? So how can we use this example of God doing this thing for us today? Well, there's a couple things to take into consideration here. Right off the hop, he said after the flood that look at the, essentially, I'm paraphrasing it, obviously, but he says, look at this sky. There's a rainbow. This rainbow is a living testament that I am no longer going to flood the earth and destroy the earth again. I have done it. I have cleansed the earth. It is now done. Look at this rainbow as a reminder of every time you see it, you think God has punished the earth and now I have a new beginning. I have a new chance at life. So that's just one thing that we even have today. And it says back in the Bible, rainbow, that's why it's there. So then faith and obedience. Let's apply this to us today. So faith. So when Noah had faith and obedience, essentially, he was given the hardest task, and he was told by God to do the hardest thing, and to get shunned by all his people. And in the process of that, God rewarded him in the highest way, saying, "You are now going to replenish the earth, and your descendants will inhabit the earth. And it is your descendants that will become the new world." So that's a pretty big ask as far as give up your life and build this ark and dedicate yourself to me. But the opposite of that is I will give you everything. Like, what could you want more than the earth? Every descendant being yours, right? That's a huge thing. So that is the way that faith and obedience today, we have to give up our old self, and we have to give up what we want and what we think and what we value, and align ourselves with what God values. And when we do that, it's very difficult, but you will always reap what you sow. And if you reap the fruits of the Spirit, then you will sow multitudes of love and grace and joy in your life. So that's what God's teaching us through this story is just follow me and let it be tough. But the tough doesn't matter because it's what's at the end of the line that matters. Why do people run a marathon? It doesn't make sense when you look at it as just you're running and hurting yourself, and every step is agonizing if you're not used to it, and you just go and go and go and go until you think you can't, you go even more. It's like, why would you do that to yourself? Well, it's because you want to complete the task. You want to finish a marathon, or you want to win first place. You have these goals in your mind. You look at the end goal. You don't look at yourself that second, right? You don't look at yourself saying, "I'm suffering now for nothing." You say, "No, I'm suffering now because I'm going to win, because I'm going to reach the finish line, and that means something." So that's the same way that God can use us. We have to look at the finish line. We have to look down the road. We can't look in today and in this minute and this hour. It's always look down the road, look in the future, and see what that holds for you, because that's what ultimately matters. And then next, God's grace and salvation. So even though God says the world has sinned so much against me, I'm done with it. They're done with me, so therefore I'm done with them. He also says, I will give them a chance again. I'm going to use Noah because he is with me and I will stay with him. And I will give them a chance to restart this and repopulate the earth and keep all the animals with them when they do it. And have all the plants come up and feed them and nurture them on the second trial as well. So God's saying, I'm not leaving you. I'm not going to kill the world and be gone and end it now. I'm going to give you another chance. Because you put your faith in me, I am always with you, is what he's telling Noah. He's saying, I will not walk from you because you have not walked from me. And that's what faith is. God is always there for you no matter what. His grace will always be there for you. Once you accept it into your heart, you can't walk away. There's no option. There's no losing your faith. You have it in him. And because you walk together through life, anything's possible. And there's no more obstacles you can't hurdle. There's nothing you can't handle. Right? And then God also gives them a fresh start saying, hey, so now that we've done this thing, you've obeyed me, you've listened to me, you've been on the ark now, I flooded the earth, and now you find land again. You have a fresh start. You're not starting off of nothing. In a sense, he is, because he's restarting, but he's not starting off with nothing. He's not starting off with sand. God sent out birds for Noah to bring back green shrubs or grass or whatever they brought back, but to prove that there was life again on Earth, that there was sustainable areas. So they found these sustainable areas, and God just gave them a restart. He said, "This is fresh. This is now yours to build. You can do what you need to do with the world to restart." He's not saying, "I'm going to give you the hardest time doing it." He's not saying this is going to be an impossible task. I'm going to give you all the tools you need to actually have a go of this again. And I want to see you succeed. So just as Noah believes that God will help him, God does help him. And God does give him the opportunity to have as many descendants as there are stars in the sky or sand on the earth, which has been discussed in the last episode there. There is infinite stars in the sky. Infinite. Right? It's impossible to comprehend how many there are. So let's tie it together here. So this first question was, how can God be a merciful God and be a just God? And it's such a hard thing to comprehend, especially if you don't understand who God is. Once you set them to your heart, it's easier. Still not perfectly easy, but it's easier. And the best way I can explain it is through his mercy, he is just. It would not be merciful for him to allow us to fully walk away from him as the entire population of Earth and fully dismiss that he exists and have no more God at all and let Noah be the last good man and let him die off and have nothing good left of it. Because then it's an infinite amount of separation from God. The rest of mankind will never know who God is. And God doesn't want that. God wants you to know him because he wants to give the opportunity for life. And if he just lets evil take over, then that's not a merciful act. That's actually the opposite. That's a horrible act if he was to allow evil to take over. Through his love for us, he said, "I'm going to let you restart. I'm going to give you another chance." So he judged the world and said, "Okay, you have now chosen all these wrong things. This is your consequence. It's going to be death. You can still choose life. You can still come on the ark. I'm giving you the option, but these are your options now, and you're limited to them." And everyone except for Noah chose this option. So through that mercy and justice, he brought them justice. And he said, "Okay, now you're going to reap what you sow. Since you sowed nothing but evil, you're going to now face death. And since you chose nothing that was mine, you're going to get nothing from me. And you're not going to live with me forever." And that's what you now are getting. That's a consequence to your actions. And it's not anger in the sense that he's mad at them personally with vendetta to them, put them into hell. He's just saying, "Hey, I am now judging you, and I'm not going to just save you for no reason. If you want to be saved, you can be saved. I'm not going to do it for nothing. You have to choose." So they chose death and he put them to death. And that's quite frankly how it is. That's how God can be perfectly merciful, perfectly just. And he can be an angry God and a gracious God at the same time. He can be a jealous God because he's saying, "I don't want you to look at your idols and praise them more than me. I don't want you to put power in your own thoughts instead of my thoughts, or power in your own abilities instead of my abilities, and disown who I am." Because the second he does that, we lose him completely. And then, like I said, that's nothing. There's nothing in that. There's no good. There's no hope. There's no love. There's no peace. There's nothing. And that's a horrible thing. So through this, he gives us a glimpse that we can correct it. And he gives us confidence in ourselves that we can do better. And that's partly what this flood means. So God gives us an image of what he's capable of. And he says, "Look at how powerful I am. And you better watch. Like, you better look at this, because I'm going to prove to you in an epic way that I am the most powerful. And you're going to see it. And you're going to hold it as something to behold forever. I'm going to give you a rainbow to remember this moment that I am all powerful. And there's nothing that I can't do. I can destroy what I've made, and I can make more of what I've destroyed. And that's God's ability. And his all-knowing presence, that all we have to do is believe in him, and there's always an answer. So even when the world's ending, Noah says, "I will do what you will me to do." And I know at the end of it, there's good to come out of it. There's an answer. No matter what the question is, God has an answer. And if you just ask him the question, he'll give you the answer, right? And you might not like the answer. That's not the point. It's not going to be something you like. The answer isn't easy all the time. The answer is an option, though. He gives you the answer as an option. He will always say, do this and you shall live, right? Not once does he say in the Bible, I am only you allowing you to do this, and the result of this is death. He's saying, no, you have the choice always to do what you want. And if you want me, you get, and you get life, and you get joy, and you get love. And if you don't want me, you don't get me, and you don't get life, and you don't get joy, you don't get love. And he has to do that. He has to have that stark judgment saying that you truly will have consequences. This is what they're going to be. And so that goes to his, he is just. And that's how you can look at him as a just God and say, have faith in that and say, you know what? I put my faith in you. And because I've done that, I know that the end game results in life for me. And that's justice. And I know that my enemies don't put faith in you. And I'm not talking about physical, I'm talking about spiritual enemies. I'm talking about like, we're past just me not liking somebody because they wronged me in life and I'm going to decide that they go to hell and I go to heaven. That's not what this means. That's me saying, God, you are good. I want to be like you. I want to do what you want me to do. I give myself up to you. I'm going to walk alongside you for the rest of my life and eternity. And God says, I will not walk from you. Right? God is with us if we choose to be with him. So that's very comforting knowing that no matter what we do, God has always said that I will be with you to the end of times if you choose to be with me to the end of times. And that's all it is. And then through that, our actions will change, our hearts will change, our minds will change. Just like baptizing yourself shows that symbolic change of the old is gone, the new is here. So it's a powerful, powerful thing. It's not something just brush over and 30 minutes doesn't do it justice, but that's all we have today. And I just want to really just nail home that fact that if you choose God, God will not walk from you ever. But you have to choose him, you have to repent your sins, and you have to truly change. Repenting doesn't mean I'm going to sin on a Saturday so I can go pray on a Sunday and it'll be okay. You don't sin to test God's faithfulness to you. You sin because you're inherently sinful, but every time you sin, if you know it was wrong, you have your moral compass pointed at God to say, I know what right is and I know I'm doing immoral deeds. Then God can save you from that. And you just have to give it to him and say, I'm not strong enough on my own to do this. But you then have to take what God gives you on your journey and you have to say, okay, I'm going to listen to him now. I'm going to apply what he's given me. That means doing the hard thing. That means that if you've chosen, let's say, to dedicate your life to something against God and you want to change, then you have to then also change. You have to choose God and let him work in you. And you have to know that you're going to have to give up a lot of what you loved because God doesn't love those things. And you're going to have to walk away from a lot of people that you thought you liked and liked you because you know that the destructive end to those actions is nothing but death and destruction. That's all that ends. The only way to get life is God. And once you align yourself with him, life becomes really easy and it opens up your eyes to know what good and wrong is because you now have a strong moral guide and you have a reference saying that you know good because God is good. And if anything doesn't align with what is good, then it is not from God and it is of our own making. So therefore, we must follow this perfect being because that is perfect being, right? Essentially, you can't have light or no, sorry, you can't have darkness without light, is what I mean by this. Light is the constant, God's the constant. Everything that comes from that, it's darker and darker. The less light, the darker it gets. There's no such thing as perfect darkness or full darkness. No matter what, there is always some light because the absolute lack of light is full darkness. And because God is omnipotent, there can never be that. God is always there. God is the first. God is the constant. God is what we compare everything to. And it goes back to that. If I do an immoral act, the reason I know it's immoral is because I'm comparing it to something that is moral. I'm comparing it to the good or holy or right act. And therefore I know that this is wrong because it doesn't align with what is good. Right? If God didn't exist, then nothing would matter and morality wouldn't exist. And survival of the fittest would mean that there is no more compassion for people. There's no more love. There's nothing. None of these things exist without God because they can't. You can't have something that exists out of nothing with nothing to compare it to. You know what hatred is because you know what perfect love looks like, right? You know that God is perfect love. So if you hate somebody, it's the opposite of that. And the reason that nothing fruitful comes out of hatred is because it's not one of the fruits of the spirit. You can't have hate in your heart if you want to love. So if you want to be alongside God, you want to love as he loved, then you have to give up hatred in his heart, and you have to give up grudges, and you have to forgive, because God is perfect forgiveness. So if you don't forgive, you can't walk alongside him. You have to give up yourself and humble yourself and say, I will forgive my worst enemy because God has forgiven me, right? And it gives you the ability to do that. So all that summed up is, I hope we got the answer today. That is how God can be a just God in the Old Testament, and he's not angry, and he's not disowning us and getting rid of us because he hates us. He's only giving us opportunities to live. He's only giving us opportunities to become better and further know him, as long as we take them. All we have to do is say yes. All we have to do is accept him into our lives. And that's what this entire book is saying over and over and over again. If you accept me, I will be there for you. So that's going to wrap it up for this one, guys. On the next one, we'll go a little bit further into the Bible, maybe into Exodus. We'll see how it goes, or it might just be a random topic. Sometimes things get into my head. So that's going to wrap it up for this one. But not every video is going to be an exact, start to finish of the Bible. Sometimes I'm going to break it up and move things along. Sometimes I just get some thoughts in my head I get passionate about. And I might do a video on forgiveness and just what that means and how that affects people and all that kind of stuff. And the next one might be on that because it's been on my mind for a while now. So I might just make a video on forgiveness, how to forgive, why forgive, what it means to forgive, all that kind of stuff. So stay tuned for that one. But again, thanks for watching. Hopefully I can see you on the next one. It's getting warmer in here, so it's easier to make videos. The camera's actually overheated once today, so I have to redo this whole thing, but that's all right. So yeah, subscribe for more, and I'll catch you next time.